episode 3 already, I believe. And I thought for this one, we'd knock out one of those basic videos that I see a lot of people do. No one in particular, but I feel like most YouTubers do something along these lines. And I've seen a lot of interesting ones and a lot of interesting exercises, a lot of like unique exercises. And I've gone with 5. Well, first of all, you saw the title already, but we're talking about 5 exercises. Like if I could only pick 5 exercises to do for the rest of my life, what would they be? And there's a couple different reasons that I picked these 5 exercises. First thing I'm looking for is how close can I push this exercise to failure without being concerned about getting hurt. Certain exercises, it's just that they're more dangerous than others. And that, in my opinion, it can be kind of a limiting factor for people, especially if you're a fan of going closer to failure. And I feel that as a natural athlete, you kind of need to get a little closer to failure. You can't afford to be like 5, 6, 7 reps away from failure. Like that's not going to get you muscle gain. And then exercises that are naturally easy to do the right way. And that'll make sense as we get into the movements. But there are just certain movements that take a lot more thought process. Like, okay, so what is it called? A Turkish get-up, I believe. Like a very complex movement, a lot going on, very challenging to push all the way to failure. This was one of those exercises that was like overhyped about 12, 13 years ago when I was in college. Everyone was like, how much can you do Turkish get-up? And it was an interesting exercise, but there was so much going on with it. Basically impossible to push to failure, true failure, because it was working so many different muscles. So we're looking for the opposite of that. Easy to push to failure, easy to keep good form throughout the exercise. And then hits a lot of muscle, basically, because that's obviously an important part of growing. It can't be something, for this video, it's not going to be something like a bicep curl that's only hitting one muscle group. And then easy to program, and that kind of ties into the pushing to failure. But there are certain exercises that I've noticed take a little bit more of a specific approach, which is fine. But then there's other exercises I've noticed that if I do sets of 10, I make progress. If I do heavy singles, I make progress. If I do sets of 20, I make progress. If I pause, I make progress. If I don't pause. So there's just certain exercises that I've noticed just progress at a faster rate than others, for a variety of reasons. Let's get right into it though. Chin-ups, one of my favorite movements. We're actually doing them today because it's back in bicep day. I absolutely love chin-ups, and they can be a little challenging at the beginning if you can't do a chin-up. I've got a video in the members only section talking about that and how you could progress forward if you can't already do a chin-up or a pull-up. But in general, with chin-ups, the easiest way to do them is the right way to do them. You can run into issues if you start tensing up and starting the motion from, kind of like halfway up. You can run into issues, but if you start from the bottom with a full stretch and you build up that way, I wish I had done that. My numbers would be way better than they are now. But in general, they're hard to mess up. That's how I think about it. So I absolutely love chin-ups. They work your back, they work your biceps, they work your grip, especially if you do pause chin-ups. And the amount of times that I've gotten injured on chin-ups, very low. Occasionally I've tweaked my elbow, but typically I can tie that to trying something outside of my range of what I was actually able to do. And that's not the exercise's fault. That's my fault for doing that and not staying, in a safe range. All right. And then secondly, farmer carries. I absolutely love farmer carries. I did them on Sunday. I have never gotten hurt doing farmer carries. And I know that sounds like a bold statement, but I really have never tweaked anything. I've been able to push them all the way to the limit. And for a spinal loading movement, I feel like that's pretty rare. I mean, the amount of times I've snapped something up on a deadlift or a back squat is not high, but there's a good number of times when I've pushed for that extra rep and I've tweaked something in the lower back. Farmer carries, even when I tried 300 per hand, and I hit absolute failure on it, my back felt totally fine. So I think it has a lot to do with the pickup point. Like on a deadlift, you're picking up from here Farmer carries, you're in a much more upright position already, so the bar does not need to travel as far. That's how I think about it. And it just stacks muscle on the core and the traps. Checks a lot of boxes for upper back development, for forearms, like the stuff that's going to make you look big, right? Like obviously having a big chest, that's great. Having core development, that's great. But people can see your forearm development. People can see your traps popping out, even if you have a shirt on. So it just loads up those traps, that weighted stretch. I've seen some really good gains in the neck from it. A lot of times I have people asking about what I do for my neck training. I don't do anything. I just do farmer carries. That's why I like the farmer carries. You might ask why I didn't pick the deadlift, because deadlift is not on this list. Like I said, I've just tweaked things a little more often on deadlift, and because of the pickup point, the start position, I think the farmer carries, like if I could only pick, one of the two or pick 5 as we're doing in the video, I would go with the farmer carries. Still love deadlifts, but farmer carries, just their track record is impeccable. Thirdly, front squat. And again, some people might be like, well, why didn't you pick back squat? Front squats are more challenging, but similar to the farmer carry and the deadlift scenario, front squats, I've never gotten hurt. And in my mind, that is going to be invaluable progressing forward. And I still do the back squats. I'm just a little more cautious with them. The front squats, because of that natural limit that you have with not the natural like limit that you can get to physically, but holding on the shoulders, it's a natural limiting factor. Whereas back squat, because it's positioned on your neck, on your traps, you're always going to be able to push for an extra rep when maybe your quads aren't ready. But front squats have a built-in brick wall, basically, where your legs, may tire out, maybe almost tired out, but your shoulders will cut out first. And so that will keep you safe. So you're still able to push very close to the limit, but you don't have to risk snapping up the lower back as much. You're also in a much more upright position. Back squat, as you start to fail, a lot of people are going to start to tilt forward. I'd say probably most people, if their lower back is stronger. My lower back is obviously stronger because my deadlift is way better than my back squat. Also, I just like front squats. I don't know, something about them. They just feel really like clean, like Olympic lifting style, full stretch, pause at the bottom. I mean, I like the regular front squat. I've done a decently heavy regular front squat max, but getting that good pause at the bottom, getting a full stretch, like it's the total opposite of the powerlifting standard where you're getting to just barely 90 degrees and you're going back up. Okay, I mean, that's cool and all, but again, I always go back to Clarence Kennedy, and he said he started squatting the way he did for aesthetic purposes because he was like, I just didn't like the way it looked when powerlifters squatted. Hopefully I didn't misquote him. If I don't drink my coffee, I'm not going to be able to work out. I'm just kidding. I'd still be able to work out, but I prefer to have the coffee in my system and the water. Got to hydrate. So yeah, front squats, a lot of good things there. Back squats, again, like I said, your lower back will typically take over, and sometimes you'll be okay, but sometimes that will lead to issues. Front squat, that never happens. Your shoulder carriage will give out beforehand, so you can fear a little less that you're going to snap something up. It can still happen, obviously. It can happen with any exercise, fortunately. Then number 4, behind the neck press. Now, behind the neck press, it's once you get the mobility to do it, and once you're able to do it, it checks all the boxes. I try not to push all the way, like into the heavy 1 rep, 3 rep range, but I have still seen good gains when I pushed into that territory. So this, out of the 5, I would say the one that, you probably want to be a little more cautious on. But once you have the mobility to do it, I've had very little shoulder issues because of it. I have had shoulder issues because of front press, and this is totally contrary to what the consensus has been over the last 10 years. People saying don't do the behind the neck press. I think it was just a popular thing to pick on. But if you go back and watch people training in the 90s and the early 2000s, there were a lot of people knocking out some big behind the neck press. Kevin Levrone did a 4-plate behind the neck press. He had some ridiculous shoulders. So I think it gets a bad, I don't know. I think people just don't give it a chance, because it's a scary exercise. People talk about deadlift the same way. I had somebody asking me, like they said they had a bad back. And I said, well, do you exercise? And like, well, no, I don't do any lifting. I was like, well, if you don't have any muscle in your lower back, I know I'm drifting off track a little bit, but if you don't have any muscle in your lower back, the odds of getting hurt are much higher. It's just like the people worried about like, well, if I exercise too much, I might get injured. It's like, true, but if you don't exercise at all, you're really going to be in trouble. So, a lot to delve into there. I don't want to drift off track too much, but I just think, if you don't use it, then you're going to run into issues. And like with the behind the neck press, I really drifted off track there. The behind the neck press, like if your shoulder mobility is so horrible and you have so much anterior cross, and then you try and go and max out on behind the neck press, yes, you're going to run into issues. If you build up to it slowly, loosen up the shoulders, increase that mobility to where you can do it safely, it's a great exercise. Again, it's easy to program. I've seen good gains with sets of 10. I've seen good gains with sets of 5. I have even seen good gains with sets of 1 and 3, although I don't really recommend that. And once you get there, it is naturally easy to keep good form. Easier so than front press, because front military press has a little bit more nuance. I don't know the term. Like there's more going on with the form. Behind the neck press, it's just straight up and down. Easy as that. Once you have the mobility, you just got to take your time getting there. That goes for any exercise though. If you don't do chin-ups and you start hammering them to 100% all of a sudden, you got to ramp into these things slowly. Behind the neck press, just even more. So I put a little asterisk when I was kind of writing out my thoughts on this. And then lastly, the double row. I love this exercise and I get a lot of comments about it. And that's kind of part of the reason why I put it in here, because I always get a lot of comments about that's going to snap up your lower back. Again, what I was talking about before, like if you don't ever challenge your lower back, you are going to run into issues. I'm a good example of that because I took 3 weeks off to kind of let the spine recover and then ended up tweaking my back a little bit. I think partly because I didn't use the lower back muscles as much. Maybe next time we'll do 2 weeks off, but you can't shy away from everything. And like, that's not going to make you strong. If the plan is to not exercise at all and have no muscle at all, then I guess you can do that. But if you want to be strong and be able to move around and be able to lift things without issue, like your lower back just needs to be strong. I mean, lift with your knees, yes, but your lower back is so central, no pun intended, to everything that you're doing. And not only the lower back, I've seen really, really good gains in the lats, in the trapezius, in the rhomboids, a lot of good density, Dr. Density, steal something from Bugenhagen there. Much more so than the single arm row. Single arm row, the only thing that happened when I got really heavy for myself. I think I worked up to like a 150. Eventually there's so much weight pulling you off to the side that it just starts to tweak your neck. With the double rows, even though it's taxing the lower back, yes, oh no, it is very stable and even and hard to mess up and hard to develop an imbalance because you're doing it equally. With the single arm row, it's very easy to end up with one side doing a little more twist and maybe the other side's a little stronger and doesn't need to twist as much. Very easy to mess stuff up, with single arm exercises that are like that. Again, I don't want to go too in depth on that sort of thing, but the double row, there's no chance of that. It's like you get the benefits of a unilateral exercise without the potential downsides of when you're trying to overload the unilateral exercise. So again, we'll run through it. So we got chin-ups, farmer carry, front squat, behind the neck press, got the asterisk there, and double row. If I could add 2 more to this list, I know now you're like, well, you said you'd only say 5. Just because I know people would ask, like, well, what would your 6th and 7th pick? I love flat bench. I love all exercise, but I love flat bench, and I absolutely love deadlifts. But again, I've had a few tweaks here and there with flat bench. I think they're great exercises, but for the reasons that I've already talked about, these are the 5 that I'm going with. Any questions about any of these at all? Plug the members only again. I've got specific videos about all these movements and how to do them in the members only. If you're interested in that sort of thing, interested to hear what the top 5 would be for you, drop it in the comments and we'll see who ends up as the victor, right? As the top exercise. I really wouldn't put back squats on there. Yeah, I would go with deadlifts and flat bench. But anyway, I'm going to get on to my chin-ups and double row. I'll just do those exercises on the list today. But I hope you have an excellent day. And any questions or comments, like I said, drop your top 5 in the comment section, and we'll catch you on the next Coffee with Pat. I still have a little coffee left here. All right, that's it. Thanks so much. Peace.